Hello everyone, I'm Christian Evans. I'm a senior editor at DRPG in the film and animation team, and I also have a YouTube channel called Planet Beer TV, which is, that's the landing page there. There's me and my co-host Paul advertising a Patreon, which is kind of like an OnlyFans. Then this is some of the content that we do. We do brewery interviews, drink-alongs, beer reviews, the occasional podcast. We do pretty well out of it. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably all sat there now thinking, what is this YouTuber doing on stage talking to me about beer at a corporate anniversary event in a safari park? And no one's wondering that more than me. But here's the thing. In my 10 years at DRPG and my 3 years doing the YouTube channel, I've realized that the biggest problem that we all face in this day and age isn't necessarily making content. It's making content that actually matters, that people actually care about and engage with. So what I'm going to do today is give you 4 little tips on how you can amplify passion and make your content that little bit more authentic and engaging, and hopefully get more people involved in it. Content that connects. And I'm going to do it through the ham-fisted medium of a beer tasting. Now, I did want beers for all you guys as well, so we could all do this together, but there's not enough to go around. So you're just going to have to watch me while I drink and talk, which, to be honest, on the YouTube channel I'm used to. So, right then, beer number 1. So we've got this totally not mocked up by AI image of these fictional beers here. We've got Authenticity Pale Ale. So this one here, 4%, and the tasting notes on this one are, give it a good ronk, unfiltered hazy, brewed small batch, and honest. No additives, no BS. Now, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from sitting there right now watching me take a sip of this beer, it's that the best content often isn't the slickest, but it is the most authentic. We've all seen videos on social media or YouTube that have amassed millions and millions of likes and views and hearts and all that, but it looks like it was shot on a toaster or something like that. On the flip side, you guys in here may have spent tens of thousands of pounds on a really smart, slick brand film, and it just failed to land. And the reason for that is essentially because it doesn't feel authentic, it doesn't feel real, it feels corporate, it feels like a sales pitch. And if there's one thing that people don't like, it's having marketing bombarding their brain with a Trojan horse, advertised as something else. Brits especially are very cynical. So I'm going to talk you through an example that I worked on recently, which was for BT. So for BT, there was a film that I worked on called Moments That Matter. And the idea behind that was BT were increasing the amount of paid leave and paid parental and carers leave for their employees. Now, we could have said that in any number of ways. We could have delivered that message as the head of HR, just talking, announcing it to a really nice upbeat music track. We could have done a little animation, really smart infographic with the BT brand guidelines. But what we decided to do was do a 60 to 90 second montage film of user-generated clips from BT employees. They sent in their moments that matter to them, little milestone moments. So we're talking phone clips from when they were seeing their kid for the first time as a newborn in a hospital, or their first words or their first steps, first day of school, or on the carer side, maybe there's a disabled relative that they've taken out to a safari park. And the whole point of it was BT are giving you more leave so you can have more moments like this. And that film, despite the fact that it looked like a ham-fisted, cobbled together load of phone footage things, and they're all different sizes, different qualities, all shot on different cameras, it went down really well. And the reason for that is because it felt real, it felt authentic. Now, you may be taking away from that I'm telling you to sit there on your marketing budget and not spend anything and just get your employees to film everything. I'm not quite saying that. I'm going to give you the flip side now about production value, which is something related to Planet Beer TV, my YouTube channel. So when I first started out doing the YouTube channel, I was watching a lot of beer YouTube, or BeerTube as it's known colloquially. And it's pretty much made up of just middle-aged dudes in a shed or a kitchen in front of a webcam talking about beer. And I thought, there's a real gap in the market for quality content here. There's a real gap in the market for something that looks like you could actually put it out on TV. So I leaned on my 15, 16 years of filmmaking experience and decided that what I'm going to do is make these higher-end little documentary pieces and tell the stories that really matter to me. And off the back of that, we were able to cut through the noise, and we were able to get a sponsorship deal with a beer map manufacturer of all things in Kettering, and a beer subscription service called Bruiser. And that's something that we definitely wouldn't have been able to do if we'd just stuck to the mold and stayed in the kitchen talking in front of a webcam. So essentially, what we did with that was we took a passion project and made it pay for itself by utilizing some content, and utilizing content that was to stand out and was a higher production value. But equally, on the flip side, you don't necessarily have to do that if you've got a really smart idea. So there's a time and a place for production value, but what should matter to all of that is that it feels authentic, it feels real, and it feels human. And that's never been more important now than with the advent of AI. You know, it's really important now that we're telling human stories in a human way. So this second beer is called Enthusiast's Edge IPA, 6.5%. And the tasting notes on this one: loud, punchy, crushable, bright notes of nerdiness and excitement. Keeps you coming back for more. We'll see about that. Now, if there's one thing that I've learned from running a niche YouTube channel, it's that enthusiasm is pretty much the lifeblood for it. You know, without that, everything fails. Because if you don't care about what you're talking about, why does anyone else care? Why is anyone else listening? They won't. And how do I know that? Well, because some of our most popular videos actually have been just me and Paul sitting in a kitchen in front of a camera drinking beer, which I appreciate there's some irony there, given that I've just told you in the first bit that we started out not doing that. But it turns out when we started doing that to fill in the gap between these really high-end production pieces, we needed something to fill that gap and keep us relevant in the algorithm. So we were like, let's just bite the bullet and sit down in the kitchen and drink some beers and talk about it. And people actually come back for that. People like watching us nerd out over hop combinations and regional beer styles and beers that we once spent £89 on, because that was the thing that we did. It's the same with any topic, you know, whether it's hops, hybrid working, your net zero strategy. If someone really cares about what they're saying, people will lean in and people will listen. So if you're making any sort of video content, put passion at the front and center of it. And that means sometimes looking at your teams and choosing people that you wouldn't normally go to. You know, choosing someone to deliver a message that they feel strongly about, but perhaps you don't know that. You didn't know that before. You know, you shouldn't just default to the person who is the slickest presenter, or that reads auto cue the best, or has the most neutral accent. What you should do is look around and find someone and go, who could help me get this message out to people and tell it in an enthusiastic way? And that doesn't necessarily mean throwing them to the lions and putting them in front of an auto cue because they don't feel comfortable with it. But they could still help you perhaps curate the content. They could help you write the script for it. You know, you all employed people in your teams because they bring something unique to the table, so you should, you know, use that. Now, obviously, it does depend on the subject because, you know, so there are going to be some messages that only the CEO or the head of finance can deliver. But in my experience, if either of those two people are talking, you're listening anyway. But this is especially relevant for topics that are more zeitgeist and of the moment, such as AI or cybersecurity or sustainability. So next time you're doing some content, perhaps think about that. Have a look in your team. Try and see who else is around who might be able to lend you something a bit different, something a bit left field. Beer number 3. We're powering through, guys. We're powering through. So this one is a dark one, and it's called Proper Purpose Porter. So there you go. Nice can design. So not all content needs to be flashy. Doesn't even need to look good. Look at that. But it does need to have a purpose. And the best content connects when it means something to someone, when someone actually watches it and goes, okay, yeah, I know why I'm watching that, or I get the point, I see what they were trying to get across there. So much of internal comms these days is just like a flood of updates. You know, you've got Teams messages, emails, SharePoint, work social media if you've got it, like Yammer, I don't know if that's still a thing, but yeah. And your message, if you're not putting that message together coherently and with a proper purpose, that will get lost in the noise. So having a real purpose and trying to find something within that, like a human insight, maybe a shared goal or a value that people can relate to and watch it and go, yeah, you know what, that was really worth my time. That's what it's all about. On the YouTube channel, we occasionally do beer reviews. I mean, because my point on this one, you don't necessarily always have to make content that is, you know, everyone's going to love. It doesn't need to land with everyone per se. It just needs to have a point where people are going to be like, yeah, cool. And when we do beer reviews on the channel, sometimes the beers that we're drinking, we don't actually like them, but because we don't like to slag off small independent breweries or anything like that, we look at what's on the tin. What's it supposed to be doing? Is it supposed to be a crisp, easygoing lager, which would be great right now outside? Or is it meant to be like a big, bold, boozy stout that you could enjoy by a fire in a pub? You know, we'll say that hits the brief, if indeed it does. And that's essentially the point with all content. So at DRPG, I worked on a series of films for Tesco called A Day in the Life. And they were essentially employee vlogs. They got employees to go around a typical day at work for them, whether that was in a store somewhere or whether that was at the head office in Welwyn Garden City. They just put together a series of clips, sent us those, and we basically pieced together with a nice little lo-fi lifestyle music track. And they went down really well. People watched it. I mean, they were intentionally used for a bit of an Instagram social media soft sell on recruiting. And they went down really well. And it wasn't just because the content and the messaging mimicked what people, their target audience, go out to watch. You know, they will sit around and watch a 90-second vlog style thing because that's what you're used to seeing on social media. But the videos also, the films, they also kind of underpinned and quietly Tesco's values in action. You know, that you got the service in the community. They showed the colleagues supporting each other. They showed them taking pride in their work. And all those things, it looks really well to people, and people watch it and it resonates. So yeah. So when you're thinking about content, ask yourself why you're making it. You know, why does this story matter? Because when me and Paul do our thing on Planet Beer, it may seem like it's just, you know, beer and it's fun and it's all silly. And obviously, sometimes it does get silly because there's alcohol involved. But there's actually, to all the stories and the videos that we make, there's a wider point. There's a theme that runs through it, and that is the fact that we are passionate and we care about independent breweries, supporting local businesses, and sustainability. So, you know, supporting the Davids rather than the Goliaths. And that shapes the stories that we tell. And because that purpose is there throughout all of it, we've got an audience that comes back for it, and people understand what we're all about, and that content lands with them. So that purpose cuts through. So think about that next time you're doing your thing. Final beer, Imperial Stout, the director's cut, 10%. I won't be driving after this one. So tasting notes for that. Complex and layered, carefully blended to bring out the best in every ingredient. So we've talked about passion, enthusiasm, authenticity, purpose, but all that means precious little if you don't put it together and execute it properly. You know, to bring it home to the kind of beer analogy, you can have all the ingredients and throw them in the fermenting vessel, but it really takes someone who actually knows what they're doing, whether that's a master brewer or just someone who does a bit of home brew, to actually be able to, you know, make the most of those ingredients and make something that's actually palatable and nice. You know, more and more brands are using their employees to go out and film user-generated content, and that's great. You know, it's cost-effective, it's scalable, it's human, it's everything that I've just been telling you is a good idea. But then that final hurdle is about knowing how to piece that together and weave it into a coherent narrative. And dare I say it, that's where a team like DRPG come in. So to go back to the first example that we had, which was the BT Carers film, to most people, to most of the audience, they would have just watched that and thought it was a really nice film and it was just a load of clips that were all just cobbled together to a really nice music track. But what they didn't see was me and the director locked in the edit suite for 2 days, going through all the footage that we'd been sent and poring over the different themes that we could perhaps pull out of them, trying out different orders, trying out different timelines for it, putting different music tracks in, ones that will deliver that real emotional hit that it needs to make it feel nice and wholesome. People don't consider that, but that's the importance of, or it's the difference between making something that just looks like a reel that your iPhone might generate just randomly, and an actual film that actually has now gone on to win awards. And that's the value that we bring. You know, it's like brewing a good beer. And essentially, that kind of pretty much rounds it off. That's the taste in flight done. That's 4 points, hopefully 4 points that you can go and take away and perhaps consider. I appreciate it's a really strange analogy, but blame Tommy for that. He put me up for this. But yeah, takeaway, guys, just think about authenticity, use enthusiastic people or people who are passionate about the subject, make sure it's got a purpose, and email us and get a quote to actually piece it all together and make something that's going to be award-winning and effective. That's my sales pitch. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great night. Bye-bye.